Phil here from Immaculately Tanked, and today I'm going to show you how I painted this Iron Hand Space Marine for the Horus Heresy by Games Workshop. Let's get started. The Iron Hands are one of the more controversial paint schemes in the Horus Heresy, as arguments can be made to paint them in any scheme from matte black to dark silver to somewhere in between. Generally speaking though, Iron Hands are described as having an oily sheen to their armor, and the official Forge World paint scheme even uses some purple and green inks to add to that oily effect. For my Iron Hand scheme, I decided to start with a layer of Martian green color shift paint from Greenstuff World over a black undercoat, and from there I plan on building up a few layers of translucent paint and inks, almost as if I was doing a black candy coat. This is my first time using color shift paints, but I found that they went on very easily through an airbrush, and the green to purple color shift effect will be a perfect base coat to build on for this Iron Hand scheme. Next up, I airbrush on a slight zenithal highlight of aluminum from the Vallejo metal color range. I'm going to want to use some green and purple inks over this model, and I figured that the bright silver color would be a good base coat to really make sure the green and purple stood out. Next up, I randomly apply spots of thinned down green and violet inks from scale 75. These are applied in a fairly random pattern, and I try to make sure that I apply these a little more intensely than I normally would in ink layer, as I plan to cover them further with inks in the next steps, and they'll get less vibrant the more inks are applied. After the green and violet inks have dried, I cover the entire model with a thinned down layer of scale 75 Inktensity wood ink. I'm trying to push for a dirty, oily effect here, and the wood ink really helps with that. Finally, I airbrush on a couple of layers of thinned down black ink over the entire model. This mixture is thinned to about 20 parts thinner to 1 part ink. Next, I apply a thinned down layer of Vallejo gloss varnish over the entire model to lock in all of the inks I just did, as well as prepare the model for the oil wash stage later on. Next, I paint all the cabling and ribbing with heavy metal by scale 75. As I will be doing a black oil wash next, I put these metal colors down now so the oil wash will shade these metals as well, and I don't have to worry about doing it again later on. As with the majority of my models, I apply a fairly sloppy black oil wash all over this model. One of my concerns with painting such a dark scheme as this is there not be enough contrast between the different parts of the armor, or different armor plates, and I'm hoping that this black oil wash will help further differentiate the armor panels. Once the oil paint has dried to a matte finish, I gently rub it off with a foam makeup remover. On a couple of parts, there was some pretty stubborn oil paint that I wanted to completely remove, so I just dipped the makeup remover in some mineral spirits and used that to completely wipe away the oil. Next, I spray the entire model with a coat of thinned down gloss varnish from Vallejo. This is to lock in the oils and make sure they don't get accidentally rubbed off later on. One issue I keep running into with trying to put decals on Space Marine shoulder pads is that the decals just don't always want to lay down flat on the curved surface of the shoulder pad. This is especially pronounced with round decals, such as the Iron Hands clan badge I'm trying to put on here. When this happens though, you can simply take a sharp X-Acto blade and gently cut slits into the decal, like I'm doing here. Also, the Iron Hands decal sheet has a bunch of really cool cog patterns on it that can be cut up and applied as armor decorations across the Marine. For example, I took one of the larger Iron Hands symbol on the sheet and cut a wedge out of the cog pattern to apply to the leg here. After the decals are dried and I've applied a layer of microsol, I apply yet another layer of varnish to lock the decals in. This time I use matte varnish by Vallejo, as I find that Vallejo's matte varnish is actually fairly satin, so it reduces the shine on the model a bit, but still leaves a metallic finish that I like. As mentioned before, I'm a bit worried about this model not having enough definition on each of the armor plates. So to remedy this, I start by applying some sponge shipping with scale 75 Thrash metal. This is a medium silver color, kind of like Lead Belcher from Games Workshop, and the sponge shipping really helps to give both the model character, as well as more clearly define the edges of the armor plates. I next continue the sponge weathering process by sponging on speed metal by scale 75. This is a much brighter silver, and will really help to clarify the edges of the armor. There are a couple of places though that the sponged on speed metal did not catch, so I'd next go back and stipple on additional highlights using a brush. For the bright silver of the shoulder pad trims, I start with a layer of Scale 75 speed metal, and then highlight them with Scale 75 white alchemy, which is extremely bright metallic white paint. I'm going for bright, piercing, and cold blue eye lenses for this marine, but I still wanted them to reflect the overall metallic paint scheme. So I started by painting the entire eye lens with speed metal by Scale 75, and then gave it a wash of Darken Off Nightshade from Games Workshop. At this point, the eye is actually pretty dull and not the piercing blue I'm going for. So I mixed up some Scale 75 white alchemy with Cyan Inktensity from Scale 75 to get a really nice metallic blue color, and paint this over the majority of the eye. Finally, I glaze the entire eye with a thinned down mix of Inktensity Cyan ink. In order to add some further contrast to the model, I decided to paint the bolter's casing white, as I was worried if it was a darker color, it would just blend into the rest of the model and not be very visible. I started by layering on Scale 75 Bering blue. This layer is not entirely necessary, but it will make the next layer of Scale 75 Artic blue a bit easier. After 2 thin coats of Artic blue, I finish off the casing with an edge highlight of pure white. The metal on the bolter was first painted with Scale 75 heavy metal, and then washed with a mixture of Games Workshop Nuln Oil and Druchii Violet. I added Druchii Violet here for a little more visual interest, but it worked just as well if you only used Nuln Oil. With dark and monochromatic color schemes, such as this one, the base of your model can represent a great opportunity to add a splash of color. For this Iron Hand, I decided to go with a Martian red basing scheme, as I figured that the rust red of the base would allow the dark armor of the Marine to really stand out, as well as provide some interesting contrast with a slight green tint to the armor. To paint the base, I start off with a layer of Shrapnel Red from Scale 75. Shrapnel Red is a nice, warm, reddish-brown color that'll be the perfect start to a vibrant Rusty Mars base. Next, I apply a wash of Reikland Fleshblade from Games Workshop. Once this wash is dried, I dry brush the base with Shrapnel Red, Chink Orange, and Orcish Dermis, also all from Scale 75. After I attach the model to the base, I used some rust orange weathering powder from Secret Weapon Miniatures to add some additional rust and dust effect to the base. I apply this powder in a pretty haphazard manner by taking a dry brush and gently dabbing the powder onto the base where I want it to go. I also make sure to get some of this powder on the lower legs of the model here. This helps tie the model into the overall base and help to provide the illusion that the model belongs in the same environment that the base represents, as opposed to just standing on top of it. All that's left now is to paint the base from black, and the model's done. The completed model is now ready to avenge his father's deaths on the battlefields of the 31st millennium. As mentioned previously, this scheme was a bit of an experiment for me with color shift paints, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. If any of you all end up experimenting with this scheme, or anything else with color shift paints, I'd love to see what you do. So please comment below, or reach out to me on my Instagram account, which can be found in the video description below. As always, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, as it really helps the channel grow, and seeing the subscriber number go up helps keep me motivated to make more videos. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.